Live from Studio G in the heart of America, I'm Steve Gruber, saying the things you wish you could, fighting for you from the foxhole of freedom, defending this great nation. This is the Steve Gruber Show. Thank you for being here. Here are three big things you need to know right now. Number one, the FBI raided the home of a major Democrat fundraiser in New York, and it could have far-reaching implications because he's connected to NYC Mayor Eric Adams, and that's just for starters. Number two, in an expected move, Vladimir Putin has pulled Russia out of the nuclear test ban treaty. It seems to be about posturing more than anything else. We'll see what happens with this protracted war in Ukraine. And number three, speaking of war, the one in Israel and Gaza has caused deep divides among nations and in the Democrat Party here at home. The GOP united in its approach to supporting Israel and rejecting terrorists, but those on the left are digging in their heels. Some believe this could tear the Democrats in half for a generation to come. In fact, here in my home state of Michigan, real panic is setting in because Michigan has the most on the line for Democrats when it comes to voters that are of Arab descent, with an estimated population of 350,000 in the state. The Muslim vote here has real muscle. In fact, the Associated Press put out a story with a headline yesterday that Democrats feared Joe Biden's position on the war in Gaza could cost him the state in the next presidential election. A critical state is Michigan, part of the blue wall. It's a very justified fear. Abraham Aish, the third-ranking Democrat in Lansing, says they have made it clear supporting Israel means paying a steep political price. So let's lay out the challenges the Democrats are facing right now with the war in Gaza. The new Speaker of the House that has the gavel because of the cavalier attitude of Democrats says he will only advance an Israel-only funding bill, $14.3 billion to start, which they did yesterday. Got it passed bipartisan support, 226 to 196. It's something the White House says it will veto, which means Democrats who collect about 90% of the Jewish vote and 75% of the Arab and Muslim vote are going to leave somebody behind. Somebody's getting left behind. And neither one has the ability to deliver real political consequences and damage. Kamala Harris blathering hard, trying to explain why a standalone bill coming from the House to support Israel with $14.3 billion and not connected to Ukraine will be vetoed by Joe Biden. Here she is hopelessly trying to explain it. Listen.
The White House has said it will veto any bill that doesn't include both Israel and Ukraine. House Speaker Mike Johnson has said that he wants to do Israel first alone and then move on to Ukraine and the U.S. border. What is the path forward there, and is there room for the White House to negotiate on U.S. border immigration issues in that package?
Well, first of all, we're not negotiating that, and we've been very clear that we must stand by the role of the United States as it relates to our global responsibility to uphold and defend international rules and norms and what is right. And so our proposal is that there be aid given to both places, to Israel and to Ukraine. And we are standing by that, as you have said. The President has been very clear. If any bifurcation of that should occur, he will veto the bill that you have referred to. But let's also be clear that these folks who want to be considered as leaders in the midst of global crises of a proportion we have not seen in a very long time are playing political games with people.
Who's playing a political game with people? You've got the bill now. Bipartisan support, 226 votes in favor, $14.3 billion, pulling from unused money that was going to fund the IRS and agents to swarm you, the American taxpayer. Then the vice president made it sound even more clear that Democrats are leaving Israel and shifting their support and who they are behind in this war. Listen to this.
There's also fear among many Palestinians that Israel will carry out a transfer of Gazans to Sinai. And this is a plan that's been in the making through more or less the history of the state of Israel. Can the United States guarantee that all Palestinians who are leaving now, whether for treatment or they are forced to leave for safety, they will be allowed to go back to Gaza after the war ends?
Let me be unequivocally clear. The people who have been forced out have a right to return home, and there should be no forced displacement, no forced migration, and that is it.
No, that is it. They should be allowed to return home. And then those on in front of the cameras on Thursday had to try to explain what President Biden meant when he claimed he had convinced Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to initiate a ceasefire. They call it a pause, but it's a ceasefire. So far, that's apparently not true. Not at all. It's a tough spot to be in when you're answering for a blathering old fool. Here's John Kirby trying to explain why Joe Biden is praising Qatar, where the leader of Hamas actually lives. Listen to this one.
John, so talking about getting Americans out of Gaza, President Biden said, I want to thank our partners in the region and particularly Qatar. The leader of Hamas lives in Qatar. So why is President Biden thanking them for anything?
Oh, geez, Peter. Let's take a step back here and look at this.
Geez,
Qatar was...
They are
Peter?
a terrorist group that killed Americans and kidnapped Americans within the last month.
Peter, Qatar has been helpful in getting those Americans out. I'm sure you would agree with me, and everybody at your network would agree, that getting American hostages out is a good thing. And Qatar was a key player in that regard. Qatar has lines of communication with Hamas that almost nobody else has. Now, I'm not saying that we support Hamas. Of course we don't. They're a terrorist organization. And Israel has an absolute right to go after them. But Qatar has lines of communication that not everybody else has. And it would be irresponsible. In fact, I would expect that you and everybody else in here would be going after me if we weren't doing everything we could and having every possible conversation we can have to get Americans that are held hostage back home with their families. If we weren't doing that, it would be diplomatic malpractice.
What it is malpractice from the podium, John. It's a different thing. Malpractice when it comes to telling the truth about how in the tank you are for a lot of these countries. John Kirby underscored, by the way, a bill funding only Israel would be vetoed by the president, begging the question, why do Jewish voters support Democrats any longer? By the way, here's his comment.
So was the vice president correct? He would veto an Israel-only bill if it didn't have other issues that you were concerned about.
The president would veto an only Israel bill. I think that we've made that clear.
Yeah, well, you're going to find out now because it's passed 226 to 196. Bipartisan support. Oh, and I forgot about the whole ceasefire comment from Joe Biden. You know, the one that never happened, the deal that never happened. Antony Blinken, by the way, on a panic trip to Israel right now to see Benjamin Netanyahu to try to clean that mess up from the president. Trying to clean up after Joe Biden's a tough job, like when Joe claims he's gotten a ceasefire that doesn't exist. Here's a bit more. Listen.
I think we've talked about this before, Colleen. I mean, we're really not just talking about like one pause. What we're trying to do is explore the idea of as many pauses as might be necessary to continue to get aid out and to continue to work to get people out safely, including hostages.
By the way, MAGA Mike, as they've come to calling Mike Johnson the Speaker of the House. MAGA Mike, that's the Democrats' slam on Mike Johnson now. Because he lives paycheck to paycheck. He's an ordinary guy who goes to church on Sunday and actually likes his wife. Weird, right? MAGA Mike says there was a ceasefire until October 7th, and Hamas broke that ceasefire. We'll talk about that right after the break here on the Steve Gruber Show. Good to see you.